Donovan is joining us today in the studio. Thanks very much.
Good to be with you, Liz.
We haven't seen you in a while. Actually, we haven't seen you since prior to the primary, so now you actually have an opponent.
It was strange for the last, over the summer when I announced in May, I didn't know who I was going to run against, and it wasn't until last Wednesday morning when we found out. You guys called the race about 1:30 in the morning. I found out who I was actually running against. But I spent the summer introducing myself to people in all regions of our state, got to know what their concerns are, and got to introduce myself to places that many people didn't know who I was.
Well, this race actually has gotten started very quickly. The very next day after the primary, you were endorsed by former New York City Mayor Ed Koch, a Democrat. And then we saw your opponent, Eric Schneiderman, earlier this week, and he had some strong words for you. I'd like you to take a listen to that.
Sure.
Okay, good.
Well, Dan Donovan said he's not allowed to endorse anybody. So, he's really taking this position that doesn't mean he's not supporting Carl Paladino. He certainly hasn't denounced Carl Paladino, as I think, reasonable Republicans across the state have begun to do. No, listen, he's running on the ticket with Carl Paladino. He's a Republican. He's anti-choice. I mean, he's been a Republican his whole career, worked his way up through the Republican machine in Staten Island. He can't get away from his party. The fact that his party has swung to the radical right, and he's still running on the ticket, I think speaks for itself.
Okay, so I understand that there are rules from the State DA's Association that you are not supposed to be endorsing people as a sitting district attorney. However, why have you not denounced Carl Paladino? Some Republicans actually have.
Yeah, but those Republicans don't have the prohibitions. Today's New York Post ran a story that the State District Attorneys Association reprimanded Kathleen Rice for endorsing Eric Schneiderman. So we are prohibited from that. And either endorsing someone or denouncing someone is the same thing. If you denounce someone, it could be interpreted as an endorsement of their opponent. So I am running as a candidate for ethical reform in Albany. That's the thing that's been lacking in our state government for at least the 12 years that Eric Schneiderman's been in the state Senate. I'm not going to violate any ethical rules as the Attorney General, and I'm certainly not going to violate any as a sitting district attorney. So I am prohibited from making any comments about Mr. Paladino's race, about Mr. Wilson's race, about Mr. De La Guardia's case.
Okay, but so you can't then say just personally how you feel about the sentiments, about the comments that Mr. Paladino has made. For example, saying that it was not wrong for Erie County Executive Chris Collins to liken the Orthodox Jewish speaker, Assembly Speaker Sheldon Silver, to the Antichrist, for example. I mean, you can't.
There's things that a lot of people say that I wouldn't say personally, that I don't believe myself. But to comment in a political campaign could be pushing the envelope and edging on the violation of our ethical mandates. As I said, somebody's been reprimanded just today for that. So, I'm pledging to the people of New York State, Liz, that I'm going to uphold the ethics that is lacking in Albany. So I'm certainly not, as a candidate, going to violate any of those ethical mandates that we have as a sitting district attorney.
Do you feel comfortable? I mean, first of all, he says, Eric Schneiderman says, well, you're a Republican and you're running on the Republican ticket. You're also running on the Conservative Party line. You're not running on the Independence Party line because you're actually investigating the Independence Party.
I'm investigating not the party, but some conduct we're reviewing that a member of the Independence Party may or may not have been involved in.
So you can't get off the line at this point, unless you sort of scuttle your whole campaign. But do you feel comfortable running with your name? It's the ticket's going to say Carl Paladino, Dan Donovan. I mean, that's what people will see when they walk into the voting booth.
And in between, they're going to say Joe De La Guardia
and Harry Wilson, et cetera. Sure.
The voters in New York are very smart, Liz. They're going to look at every single race. They're going to look at the 2 gubernatorial or 3 gubernatorial candidates and determine who they want to vote for. They're going to look at the U.S. Senate seats. They're going to look at the control seat. And then they're going to look at the Attorney General seat. And they're going to say, do we want somebody who has 7 years experience running the top prosecutor's office in the city of New York and who for 8 years before that was in the Manhattan DA's office, or do we want somebody who for 12 years was part of the most dysfunctional legislature in the country? And they'll decide that regardless of who they vote for governor or who they vote for controller. New Yorkers are famous for being what the term is ticket splitters.
Right.
But they don't go down party lines. They vote for the individual who's most qualified. And I think on November 2nd, they're going to determine that I am the most qualified candidate for Attorney General.
But you did meet at one point with Carl Paladino, and he did actually endorse you. And do you accept the endorsement? You can accept endorsements. That's allowed.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, anybody, a lot of people have endorsed me. I met Mr. Palladino in March or April. I was not a candidate yet. He visited Staten Island and wanted to meet with elected officials to introduce himself. I had never met him before, and since that time I've seen him once when we were both in a green room to do an ABC news show one Sunday morning. So my campaign has no affiliation with his has none with me. I have no campaign affiliation with Harry Wilson, Joe De La Guardia, or Jay Townsend, any of the congressional candidates, any of the Senate or Assembly candidates. I am running an individual campaign, obeying the mandates by the organization that I was the head of, the State DA's Association. So we're running a campaign. We have a plan to win November 2nd. We believe we become the next Attorney General in the state.
You know, your biggest endorser actually to date is Mayor Bloomberg. He was very supportive of you, has been very supportive of you. And just yesterday, he endorsed Andrew Cuomo. When we talk about ticket splitting, the guy just went and endorsed the Democratic candidate for governor. Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, Mayor Bloomberg looks to see who he thinks is the best candidate and the best person to serve the people of our state. He has endorsed me as an independent mayor. Mayor Koch, probably one of the most highest profile Democrats in the state, endorsed me. Rudy Giuliani, a Republican mayor. And all of these three individuals are pro-choice. They know that choice is not an issue in this campaign. Every woman's right for her own reproductive health care and her choices in her reproductive health care have been set in stone in our state for over 50 years. They are never going to change, Liz, and I am certainly not going to make any efforts to change those. I have committed to the women of our state that I will not only uphold their right and protect their right for their own choice in their reproductive health care, but I will take the appropriate action against anyone who tries to interfere with that. In campaigns, Liz, in law we call them red herrings. When you can't argue the facts, you try to distract people from what the issues are.
Is that what you think Eric Schneiderman's
That's
doing?
exactly what they're doing.
Because NARAL actually has a video, and it's interesting that you bring it up. I'd like to take a look at that, too.
Sure.
Okay, so you can say right here, pledge right now, that you are not going to try and do any of those things that other attorneys general elsewhere in the state have done.
I pledge to the people of New York that will never happen under my administration.
You won't try and shut down abortion clinics.
No.
You won't seek to change the law in any way.
I will protect every woman's rights in the state. And I'll take the action against somebody who tries to interfere with that right. Those people seem to be activists in one issue. I'm going to fight corruption in Albany. I have a plan to fight corruption in Albany, bring people's faith back in their government and their elected leaders, and break up the dysfunction and corruption that Eric Schneiderman's been part of for the last 12 years. That's the issue here. I promise the women of our state that I will never interfere with their right to choose their health care.
You know, another issue that has come up in other attorneys general races across the nation, and today it's sort of pretty apropos because aspects of the health care reform law go into effect today. Other attorney generals have actually sued over that particular law. Would you join that suit?
You know, Liz, I've been asked that before. When we first looked at that lawsuit, there were about 15 attorneys generals on the lawsuit. 14 of those 15 individuals were seeking higher office at the time that they filed suit. It was a political lawsuit. I have promised the people, I have pledged to the people of New York State that I will not run for higher office as Attorney General. I want everyone to believe every decision I make as Attorney General is because it's the right one for our citizens and not for my political aspirations to seek higher office. If I reviewed the health care bill and thought it was bad for our citizens, I would file my own lawsuit against it, but I would not join a political lawsuit like the one that's going through the courts now.
So will you do that, though? Will you review the Obama health care bill? You would consider actually filing a lawsuit
if it was bad for our state, if it was bad for our citizens, if it hurt our citizens more than helped our citizens, certainly.
And that's something you will do if you're elected?
We will look at that, but I'm not sure right now if that's the appropriate action. It may be good for us, our state. It may not be good for our state. We will explore that. We'll get the experts to look at it. We'll review it, find out what's best for the people of our state. But if action against that health care bill has to be taken, I wouldn't join the political lawsuit that's taking place now. We'd file our own.
You know, you're here in Albany actually to attend a fundraiser, if I'm not mistaken, with the Senate Minority Leader. You've said some strong things. You've sought to tie Eric Schneiderman to this sort of Albany dysfunction. You're making him into a creature of Albany. People are running against Albany. It's not a little disingenuous to come here and raise money with the Senate Minority Leader who is trying to take back the Senate?
They believe in my campaign. They believe in the values that I have, and they believe I'm the strongest candidate. But corruption's not unique to either side of the aisle, Liz. I'm not campaigning that I'm going to fight corruption in the Democratic Assembly or Democratic Senate. I'm going to fight corruption wherever it is, including Wall Street. You know, I've been accused of being soft on Wall Street.
Yes, they have accused you of that.
Right, and that's a political ploy, too. What I have said is that I don't want to be the sheriff of Wall Street. I'm going to be the sheriff for all the people of the state of New York. And we will fight corruption aggressively wherever it is, whether it's in Medicaid fraud, whether it's in our House, legislative houses, or whether it's on Wall Street.
So you would investigate the Senate Republicans if necessary?
If necessary, I certainly would.
Including Dean Skelos, who's hosting this fundraiser?
Wherever evidence lies that there's corruption in our state government, I will investigate, no matter what their political affiliation is.
This race has gotten pretty dirty pretty fast, or at least I should say pretty nasty pretty fast.
Yeah, I'm not sure nasty. I think Mr. Schneiderman's trying to distinguish himself from me, and I'm distinguishing myself from him. I have not heard Mr. Schneiderman say anything personally bad about me, and I have never said anything personally bad about him. I want the voters to compare my record of accomplishment, my record as an executive, running a chief law enforcement office for the last 7 years, bringing an office from the worst in the city of New York to the first, leading the city in crime reduction and conviction rates and fighting crime, and compare that to 12 years of being part of a dysfunctional legislature that the Brennan Justice Center said is the most dysfunctional in the nation. Liz, that's a disgrace, and he's been part of it for 12 years. So it's nothing personal about Mr. Schneiderman, and I have not heard him say anything personal about me. It's comparing our records and trying to tell the voters who is the best candidate and who's the best positioned to lead us in the Attorney General's office beginning in January.
Well, there's going to be a lot more comparison, I'm sure, because we have a number of weeks left, and I'm sure we'll be seeing you again. But in the meantime, I want to thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.